What's going on, everybody? I hope you guys are enjoying your break. Um, as most of you guys know, I went to the field the other day to look for Todd's keys, but ended up staying for a few hours, just kind of talking to people and asking questions and taking pictures. So this is kind of what I found. Um, the order of this is that we're going to talk about the wings, then the fuselage, kind of touch on modularity. We'll hit the landing gear, talk about the control surfaces a little bit, and then kind of touch on the monocoque. A lot of these things all kind of play into each other, so just keep that in mind that they aren't discrete sections. So let's just get right into it. We're going to be starting with the wings. So right off the bat, what I was noticing when I was looking at these planes is the shape of their wing. As you can see, the wing plus the aileron makes up the entire airfoil, whereas ours, like our wing was an airfoil, and then we kind of stuck an aileron onto it. So that's just one thing that we can do in the second iteration to actually stay true to our airfoil. Um, actually stay true to our airfoil. Um, this wing here is tapered. It's not tapered to the extent that ours is. So maybe we don't have to go all the way to rectangular wing, but I think we need to tend more towards a rectangular style wing just for simplicity of manufacturing. Um, so our wing held together pretty good. Um, like it didn't break other than where it broke off on the fuselage. But one thing that these planes do differently than what we do is how they lay the D-box. It's much thicker, and it also runs over every single one of the spars or over the ribs. So you can kind of see how like each section kind of makes a square. That's because they ran the D-box over it. Um, these pictures might be kind of hard to tell, but I've kind of highlighted the areas just to show you, like guys, like where the D box is and like how thick it is. Like you can see that the D box is almost like half of the wing, basically. And this is on the top and bottom, and obviously on the left and right wings. Um, so it's just much thicker than like how we have done it. So this might be a good thing to do in the next iteration. Um, some tips that one guy had told me was that we should get or build a rack of some kind that keeps the wing straight when we are building it, so that way we don't have any like twists, and it just kind of simplifies it. He said it just makes it easier. For the D box, he also said that there's like a piece that you can get at Graves that is like a leading edge piece that you put on first. So we should look into getting that. He also recommended getting glue that dries really slow, and or not really slow, but slower than 5 seconds, and get some clamps so that we can clamp everything down. Um, we did a good job on the balsa, like when we did it, but instead of molding it like on a or bending it on like a water bottle or something first, he recommended that we just give it like we just lightly spray it with water on the side of the balsa that you're like in the direction that you're bending, and then bend it directly onto the airfoil. And so then the way that you would do that is you would glue the ribs. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but um, on this picture, like this is a picture on the internal structure, and like I'll talk about this in a second. But here's the ribs, and then you would basically glue this, and then you would lay the balsa over top of it, and then what you would do is you would roll from the leading edge to the trailing edge and just kind of make sure that everything is laying flat. Um, so we could that is just something that he recommended. And then he said when you're done with that, sand the front until you think you're done, and then sand some more just to make sure that everything is smooth. And he also recommended that if we get some time to watch some videos on how they used to bend the wood for making wooden boats. That might just be something if like a quick little like 5 minute YouTube video or how to like bend the balsa. But he's recommended that was something that we could look into. Um, so kind of building off of these pictures and showing you guys the D-box. This is the inside of the internal structure of the wing. These down here are elevators. This is the wing, this is a wing, and this is a wing. But you can see like how they lay theirs out. They don't have any like spar that runs through this big gap. There is this little connection here that snaps into the side of the plane, but really they just have this tube that runs through the wing. And so then what happens is is a spar will go into this tube and it'll connect to the fuselage, and we'll get into how that works in like the modularity section. But this is just kind of a picture to show you guys like the internal structure of the wings. Um, Moving on to the fuselage. This one was one that I saw that looked similar to ours in that it uses a lot of trusses. As you can see here, like you can see the trusses all throughout, and even up here somewhere in the tail. That was There was one other plane that I saw like that was there, but a far more common thing that I saw was like these rounded out structures. They were saying that like corners are typically where things break, so rounded and like circular structures are really good for us. So maybe we can try to incorporate these um, more into our design. Also, I feel as though this might help us reduce our weight overall. I could be wrong, but we'd have to like do some more analysis on like how spaced out these circles would have to be and like all that kind of stuff. But the general thought process is that having eliminating the truss piece that crosses here is more beneficial than the extra wood that we would have to like fill. Like if this was a square, this corner would be here, right? So you'd have to like fill that gap to make it rounded, and the gaps probably take less wood than the truss going across. I don't know. I'm kind of just pulling that out of my ass, but it's something that we could look into if we need to cut weight, and we're always trying to cut weight, but we'd have to analyze those things more. Um, Here is this plane. Actually, sorry, we're back on this plane. Um, this plane, this is just a picture of like towards the tail. I stuck my phone in the fuselage and stuck it towards the tail, and you can kind of see like how they lay everything out. These wires here that you see are actually, it's one servo that's a double arm servo. So you can see, you can't really see the connections here. You might in the full picture, but PowerPoint kind of trimmed it. But basically, these crisscross here, and they come out of the back of the plane, and that's how they attach to the rudder, so that when it rotates, it pulls on one side and pushes on the other. It's called a push-pull system. Um, we can do this if we want. We can also use one servo. The same thing is really like it works with just one, the way that we did it. Um, the guy said, I asked the guy that I was talking to if there was a benefit for using one over the other, and basically said that that was an unanswerable question, and like that's like, do you prefer Cool Ranch Doritos or nacho cheese Doritos? It's like a preference thing, you know? It's like nobody knows the answer. So it could be something that we could explore, but it's gonna increase the weight, and he said it's also kind of finicky to set up, just to make sure that they're working actually together. So it's an option, but we probably can just stick with the single arm. So the modularity, this was a big thing that we were having problems with, like transportation. Like if we build a bigger plane, we're not going to be able to just put it in the back of somebody's car. But every single one of these planes that was there broke down in some way for easy storage. The wings came off, the elevators came off, and in some cases even like the rudders came off. So like there was a few options. One thing to note is that 99% of the planes that were there were mid-wing configurations. However, there was one wing that was a high wing, or one plane that had a high wing configuration like we have. So I'll talk about how the mid-wings go down, and then we'll talk about how the high wing one was done. Excuse me. So back on this yellow and blue plane where we were talking about the structure, if you look here, this is kind of how the plane is, like this is where the modularity, like the magic happens, right? So if you remember the picture of the internal structure of the wing here, the internal wing has this rod that goes all the way through, okay? But this is not the main like the main load bearing spar. This is just kind of like, so it makes it easy to slide in and out. So like you don't have to like line everything up. It'll just slide into the tube, right? So what happens is that there's a hole in the side of the plane where that lines up, and you stick the spar through the fuselage, and then you slide the wings onto those, okay? And the spar doesn't extend all the way to the tip of the plane. We only need it to really go like halfway, maybe a little past halfway. So that way it's continuous from one wing through the fuselage into the other wing, but it's not spanning the full wingspan. Um, but so what happens is that bar goes through, it slides into the um, tube that's in the inner wing structure, and then what happens is if I go to wait, I gotta go back to the picture. Sorry. Here. So this is the area we're talking about. This bar here. So the fuselage also has one of these tubes that was featured in the wing. Um, so then the main spar goes into this tube and then it sticks out like how it does here, and then you slide the wings on. Um, these little notches here are where the rest of the plane snaps in. So like these slide into those spots. Sorry, I'm like bouncing all over. But those little notches slide into these to help it like stable, keep it stable, make it secure. And so then none of this is glued in other than these original tubes, but like this main spar is removable. So what happens is that these entire things are held via compression, and that is done here. So these little screws, there's something that it screws into inside the wing, and it just tightens down, and this is what keeps it attached to the fuselage. It's just this basically. There's one of these on either side, and if I go back to the wing structure, you'll notice that like these are here on the elevators as well, and in the corner down here is where it snaps in like this. You can kind of see the edge of the white one here, but this is what it is here. And that's all it does. It's just compression that holds these wings together. Um, oh, I didn't know I put these in here. Whoops. Those are the knobs that screw in. So that's how they basically operate for the mid-wing configurations. So this is an example of the high wing that I saw. This is the only one that I saw that had like a high wing out of all of the planes that were there. Um, and so what you'll notice is that this whole top piece comes off, and this is where the wing sits. And then this is where like this is a gas powered one, but like this is the like where the motor is, and then this is the gas. So for us, it would be this is where like our motor would be, and this is like batteries and stuff. And so this front piece is covered by this, where it just pops in, and there's magnets that snap it on to access the battery. And the wing sits in this little groove here. And so the way that this works is you see this notch kind of right here. Um, the wings are two separate pieces that have a spar in the middle, similar to the other, and those two just like slide on. There's nothing that holds them together. And then there's a hook on the front of the wing right here that hooks under into this little notch, right? And then the wing, this side of the wing here kind of falls down, and then you just screw them in. And so those screws there keep the wing from wanting to separate and keeps it locked down onto the plane. So this might be something that I don't know how hard it's going to be to do on a bigger plane. This model was rather small. Well, it was like maybe the size of the blue stunt plane that was there on the test flight day. Sorry for those of you that weren't there. It's maybe like 3 feet, something like that. But it could be something to explore. Also, this plane has flaps, and so they just have two servos running. So we could all like it doesn't seem that hard. All we would have to do is literally just cut the aileron and add another servo. But that might be something to look into to aid in our takeoff. Um, Another way like this another thing was the hatches, right? To like access things. So this one, these two things slide in, and then there's magnets that hold it down. And that's basically the common theme is you have two things that slide in, and you have something that locks it down. So here on this plane, there's two little rods that stick out, and so what would happen is these would slide into their designated spots to hold the plane or to hold the hatch, and then you would set the hatch down, and then here underneath there's two little screws that you would screw, or two little things that you would screw into this to keep it um, attached to the plane. And so if I go to the next picture, you'll see here is like the side of this plane. You'll see the hatch is in. You slide the front two things in. The back of the hatch falls down, and the screw slides in here to keep it locked in. One thing is like, or another thing is like, here's just a way that the wing connects. They have this cutout here for like the servo. So all of the connection wires are all like sticking out of little holes always to make it so that you just snap them together. Like if I go all the way back to here, like notice how all of these connection wires are just sticking out here. So it makes it really easy to snap everything together. Um, Here's another way that they did it. Instead of like a screw like this one, this basically is a latch that just latches down like this, and then you can take it off, and then you put the hatch on, and then it comes back up. There's a whole mechanism inside that does that, and then here again is just ways or like the wing connections, landing gears. Uh, there was two options. One was you had a tire that actually turns. Another one was the tire always stays straight and you actually turn with the rudder, like producing a yaw uh, or a yawing moment. I don't think we can do that because it's just harder to control. You have to like gas it and then turn the rudder and then let off and then gas it and turn the rudder and let off. Whereas this, you can just turn the rudder and drive forward. Notice here that it's not actually connected. The way that it's connected is here on the rudder. So it creates a moment on this arm that turns the wheel while the rudder turns. And so that eliminates the problem that we were having with our wheel back here, is that with this, you can keep the wheel kind of centered under the plane so that when you turn it, it doesn't tip over like how we were having. Um, so this is probably the way that we should go from here on out, or something similar to this. Some of them also had like springs to like kind of aid in the like this part here would be springy to kind of aid in like landing, so that like it doesn't like break off basically. Um, so now control surfaces and monocoat, these two kind of like play heavily into each other just because a lot of the pictures that I took of the control surfaces are close up and you can see the monocoat that was laid. So we did a good job on the control surfaces. Like it kind of responded when Todd told it to go like roll right to correct it. It rolled right and then it rolled left and then broke. um, but on the control surfaces, Bill said this when we were there too. Our connection points here need to be like as close to the hinge as we can. So like you see this bevel here, they have theirs right up on that bevel. It just helps with control, makes it more responsive, I think, and makes it easier. Like I don't know, they recommended doing that, so let's do it. It's kind of the thing I'm going for here. It's the same deal on the elevators. Um, this one I believe had two servos on either side for the elevators. But there was also another one there that had a cutout here in the rudder, and they just fed like a U-bar through the elevator so that it was just one servo to go. I think to rotate. I think we do this just for weight purposes and simplicity as we do the U-bar. Um, yeah. So the hinges that they used were like the hinges that we used typically. There was another example, like I'll show a picture on like the next slide that has another. Um, it was like the single hinge, like the one that was on the rudder, the black one that was like just like a cylinder that bent basically. They used those hinges, but most of the planes used these like typical like door hinge whatevers. But look at how close everything is. Like the only thing that's really exposed is the hinge. Um, they also had these really nice bevels so that you could get max deflection and on up and down. Um, so yeah, this is definitely something. They don't do the thing that George was talking about where they monocoat entirely over it, but with these, the like there is not a like this gap is basically non-existent, especially when you're like at deflection. It's really not that big of a deal, it doesn't seem. Um, to comment on the monocoat, like these edges, they basically, one of the guys that I was talking to said, what you do for these is you wrap the edge first, and then what you come over the top of it and wrap it around. So you can kind of see how these are folded down and around to kind of hold that edge in. He says it makes it look nice, and it's just better to do it that way. Um, Here's an example. I believe this plane had the single hinge things that I was talking about, but it's just another example of the side and how like the size of the aileron and wing. You also see an example of how the monocoat is laid over the edge here. It's like laid flat, and then this one big sheet comes over and just lays over. Some Monaco tips that they gave us. Whoops, if I go back, they said get a sock for the iron. So I don't know if they actually mean just like put a sock on it, or if there's something called the sock that like put over the iron. And like I said, it says lay. He said it'll save this. He said the sock will save us a lot of cussing down the road. He said lay the edges first and then wrap over, which I said. And also in the photos, like I took a bunch of photos. I think there's like 75 or something. And so there's a bunch of examples of like how they laid monocoats, like at different sides or at different points, like different connections and like bends in the design of the plane. So some overall general tips that they gave us. One guy said that we should really invest in a prop balancer, because when that thing gets spinning, like any sort of vibration or unbalance will cause a lot of vibration, and will just it could possibly rip the motor mount out. It just is going to make the whole thing just shake. So just having a balance prop is a good way to go. He said they're like $10. Everybody I talked to was always emphasizing the importance of CG. So we really have to make that a point to make sure that we know where our CG is and that we can control it. They said always be checking where it is. They don't wait until you have everything put together to check where your CG is. Like they say, if you add a servo, check how that changes your CG. Where do you want to place it? Do you want to place it closer to the tail? Do you want to move it forward? They said that every single ounce matters. So we can use our servo placements to also help balance our CG. We can make our arms, like our connection arms, shorter, longer, doesn't matter. But always be checking and considering how our CG is being affected. And I think with that, that should be it.